We will discuss two theories today, which is face negotiation theory and framing theory. Studied by Stella Ting Tome, a professor of human communication studies at California State University, Fullerton, her research interest focused on fine-tuning the conflict face negotiation theory and testing the impact of situational and ethnic identity factors and conflict styles. She believes that face entails the presentation of a civilized front to another individual, social approved self image, and other image consideration issues. Perhaps you have a friend who is from Appalachian America or other collectivist culture. The lens your friend would go to in order to avoid conflict during a disagreement may have surprised you. Likewise, your friend may have been shocked by your directness. If you have been in a situation like this, you have experienced face negotiation theory in practice. Face negotiation theory seeks to explain and understand the dynamics of intercultural communication. People from individualistic cultures, including most Americans, and people from collectivistic cultures, such as Appalachia, use different ways to save face and resolve conflict. In fact, they have different ideas of what constitutes saving face. And unfortunately, what seems right and natural to members of one culture may seem highly inappropriate to members of other. Fully understood and properly implied, face negotiation theory can help people of different cultures avoid needless misunderstandings and come to mutually beneficial agreements. Let's enumerate important details about this theory. Face negotiation is based on face management, which describes how people from different cultures manage conflict negotiation to maintain face. Said face and other face concerns explain the conflict negotiation between people from various cultures. Face is clearly an important feature of life. This is a metaphor for self image that pervades all aspects of social life. Face concern is the interest in maintaining one's face or the face of others. Positive face, the face or the desire to be liked and admired by others. And negative face is the desire to be autonomous and free from others. Intercultural face for competence is about the mindful and creative management of emotional frustrations due primarily to cultural or ethnic group membership identifies differences. It means having the necessary cultural based knowledge and ethno-relative attitude in making the commitment to interpreting the conflict communication process from an alternative cultural viewfinder. It means paying exquisite attention to identify related back and forth negotiation and respect disrespect issues. Mindful face work transformation process refers to incremental awakening process of being in touch with our filtered senses and realizing our reactive senses and cultural worldviews shape our gut level conflict reactions. It only means our willingness to take the time to step into the mindset and the heart set of our conflict opponents and seeing and sensing things from their conflict senses or lenses. Elastic conflict communication skills such as a cultural decentering, mindful listening, empathetic resonance, mindful reframing, adaptive code switching, and mutual face dialogue skills are some of the face sensitive behaviors that all administrators, face members, faculty, and international and American students, or whatever kind of students, can practice in order to arrive at a common interest process and a common interest conflict outcome. Face negotiation theory is based on the underlying assumption that regardless of their culture, people are all concerned with saving face. The theory attempts to explain the reason behind the different ways people from different cultures handled conflicts. According to face negotiation theory, this occurs because people of different cultures have different priorities when it comes to saving face, and they have different ideas of what constitutes a saving face. The theory places special emphasis upon the different viewpoints of members of collectivist and individualistic cultures. Because collectivist cultures emphasize the collective, members seek to avoid anything that may damage the group. And as a result, they often avoid conflict and they often allow others to save face when a conflict is unavoidable. Additionally, saving the group's face is viewed as primary, with individual face saving taking a backseat. Individualistic culture, on the other hand, emphasize the individual, and members who feel the need to make others lose face in order to save their own often believe that avoiding conflicts lead to losing face. In these cultures, the face of the group may be a secondary consideration or may not be consideration at all. You can notice to the framework that underlying face threatening acts, which are face restoration, offering excuse for embarrassment or predicament, and face saving, preventing or stopping embarrassment or predicament. Think Tovey based her face negotiation theory on the distinction between two cultures. Number one is collectivistic culture, wherein people identify with a larger group that is responsible for providing care in exchange for group loyalty, we identity, and a high context culture. On the other side, of an individualistic culture, wherein people look out for themselves and their immediate families, I identity, and a low context culture. Let us now define the collectivistic people. They are socialized to enjoy duty that requires sacrifices in the service of others, value collective needs and goals. Each individual decision affects everyone in the group. Behavior is controlled by the group norm. The strong in group identity leads them to perceive others in us them categories. It's more important to identify an outsider's background and group affiliation than the person's feelings or attitudes, because unique individual differences seem less important than group based information. And more than two-thirds of the world related or belong to collectivistic people. Now let's view the individual people. They are independent of any group affiliation, pursue personal interests, determine a course of action that he would see as enjoyable and personally rewarding, value individual needs and goals, concerned with individual rights rather than group responsibilities, focus on interior life of visitors from other cultures, assume that every person is unique, and they reduce uncertainty by asking questions to the point of cross-examination, and the I identity. Consider the different face work strategies. Number one, face concern, regard for self face, other face, or mutual face. This is a third orientation in which there's equal concern for both parties' images as well as the public image of the relationship, or a mutual face concern, and the people who have it would try to save their face as well as the other person's face. Number two is face restoration, the self concerned face work strategy used to preserve autonomy and defend against loss of personal freedom. This is the typical strategy in individualistic culture. Number three is face giving, the other concerned face work strategy used to defend and support other person's need for inclusion, taking care not to embarrass or humiliate the other in public. But they aren't exclusive to those cultures. All people desire affiliation and autonomy within their particular society. There is a five distinct response to situations where there is an incompatibility of needs, interests, or goals. Number one is avoiding, responding to conflict by withdrawing from open discussion. Number two is obliging, accommodating or giving in to the wishes of another conflict situation. Three is compromising, conflict management by negotiating or bargaining. seeking a middle way. Number four is dominating, competing to win when people's interests conflict. And number five is integrating, problem solving through open discussion, collaborating for a win win resolution conflict. Now let's study the framing theory. Here's the related scenario. Political ads provide valuable lessons in framing. In one ad, President Obama thought his job created the record, citing over 4 million jobs added to the economy since he took office. In another ad, Governor Mitt Romney criticizes President Obama's job creation by pointing out that unemployment is still hovering around 8% and the economy still lacks 261,000 jobs that were lost during the president's tenure. Both ads rely on the same set of facts. However, one ad frames the numbers in a positive manner while the other frames it negatively. Framing refers to how the media packages and presents information to the public. According to the theory, the media highlights certain events and then places them within a particular context to encourage or discourage certain interpretations. In this way, the media exercises a selective influence over how people view reality. Anthropologist Gregory Bateson is created with first positing the theory in 1972. Framing is sometimes referred to as second level agenda setting because of its close relation to agenda setting theory. In essence, framing theory suggests that how something is presented to the audience, called the frame, influences the choices people make about how to process that information. Frames are abstractions that work to organize or structure message meaning. The most common use of frames is in terms of the frame the news or media plays on the information they convey. They are thought to influence the perception of the news by the audience. In this way, it could be construed as a form of second level agenda setting. They not only tell the audience what to think about, which is that's the meaning of agenda setting theory, but also how to think about that issue, the second level agenda setting, which is the framing theory. The following concepts are associated with framing. Number one, journalists select the topic they will present and decide how they will be presented. This determines the issues audiences think about and how they think about them. Number two, audiences interpret information through their own frames. Audiences' frames may overlap or contradict the media's frames. Number three, frames are reinforced every time they are evoked, whether positively or negatively. And lastly, frame building a systematic process that occurs over time. Natural frameworks identify events as physical occurrences, taking natural quote literary and not attributing any social forces to the causation of events. Social frameworks view events as social driven occurrences due to the whims, goals, and manipulations on the part of other social players or the people. Social frameworks are built on the natural frameworks, and these frameworks or the frames that they create in our communication greatly influence how data is interpreted, processed, and communicated. Goffman's underlying assumption is that individuals are capable users of these frameworks on a day to day basis, whether they are aware of them or not. Framing occurs in the media mostly because of time and resource constraints on what can be reported. Journalists must choose which events to cover and which to ignore. They must also decide which facts, values, and perspectives will be mentioned or given preeminence. This means journalists apply their own interpretive frames when packing or packaging news. Reporters are also influenced by social norms, pressure from interest groups, journalistic routines, and their own ideologically or political orientation. And as a result, some definitions, evaluations, and recommendations contained within news reports are promoted over others. This affects audiences by limiting how they perceive and interpret events. What are frames? Frames are systems or preconceived ideas used to organize and interpret new information. They function as heuristics or the rule of thumb that allows people to quickly process news. In psychology, frames are also known as scripts or schemata. Frames are mostly cultural in origin. People develop them at very early age. Nearly every word of one's language evokes a frame. For instance, the word war in English conjures up image of death, blood, gunfire, bombs, explosions, planes, tanks, and ranks of marching soldiers. Therefore, when someone's referred to war, these images provide a shared point of reference between the speaker and the listener. Even the word communication has a frame. Its elements include a messenger, a message, a recipient, a medium, and a context. Common frames used by the media include war and terror, battle with cancer, and job outsourcing. How frame works. Rather than selecting a frame to process information when confronted with news, people instead view the world through their frames and make new information fit into them. Information that contradicts a frame is usually written off as an exemption to the rule or distorted to fit the frame. And as a result, people are most likely to notice information that fits into their frames and ignore facts that do not. Journalists or politicians who want to introduce a new frame to audience must therefore reference culturally popular ideas and develop novel phrases that link existing frames in a compelling way. A professor of UC Berkeley, for example, point to the appearance of the words tax relief during George W. Bush administration. In the frame evoked by the word relief, there exist several ideas. A crime or accident that has occurred to inflict suffering, a perpetrator of the crime, a victim, a reliever of the suffering, and the method of relief. By using this frame in conjunction with taxes, taxes become associated with crime or the cause of suffering. As a result, those who promoted tax relief are seen as heroes or the relievers of suffering. Those who call for increased taxation, however necessary it may be, are viewed as criminals.